Hi everyone, and on today's Facebook page we're going to be talking about folate, and this is probably the most difficult of all of our sessions, because for you to understand and pick which folate is the best form for you is actually quite difficult. So some of the things that we need to look at firstly is, what do we consider folate? So folate is an umbrella term, and it includes three forms of folate: folic acid, folinic acid, and 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. So folic acid is our man-made supplemental form. It's synthetic. It does not have any activity in the body unless the body can use it. And as most of you will know by now, we don't want to use that if we have the MTHFR gene, because it puts pressure on our dihydrofolate reductase enzyme, which stops your good folate coming into the system. And there's lots of resources on our website that talk about the difference between folic and the other forms of folate, so you can have a look at those. The second is folinic. Now, folinic is an active form. It's really important in our purine synthesis, so it is important for us in preconception as well. But it's a really important folate that helps us recircle our good folates so that it can be converted into our active, which is 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. So there are some genetic polymorphisms, particularly MTHFS, where folinic may not be broken down effectively. So if you do have an MTHFS, what we usually see in methylation reports is that your folinic acid is too high. And so we need to support the cofactors with magnesium and ATP to help you break that folinic down. So for those of you who do have an MTHFS mutation, folinic may not be the best option. So we're going to talk about what is. And 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate is obviously our active. So what do we actually do? So step one, we have to avoid folic acid. So we need to look at all our products. So by law, all commercial bread flour has to be fortified with folic acid. So you need to look at bread, you need to look at the labels. Organic brands are usually okay, but it's their option to put folic acid in there. So you need to search and have a look at labels. If it says folate, then it's going to be folic acid. Packaged goods of all forms, if it has folate in it, it's folic acid. Protein powders, protein balls, breakfast cereals, a lot of them are fortified with so-called folate. So we've got to be avoiding those too. So we've got then a choice. Do we use folinic or do we use 5-methyl? So let's have a look at some of the signs and symptoms of low folate. So from a blood perspective, we certainly would look at things like your mean cell volume. Is that elevated? Usually I look at levels above 89. Red cell distribution width, which is another red cell blood marker. It may be, if it's greater than 13%, then the chances are your B12 and or folate are low. And there's a lot of others as well. But some signs and symptoms might be premature graying hair, fatigue, mouth ulcers, tongue swelling, growth problems, chronic fatigue at an early age, multiple miscarriages in the family, heart attack, stroke, anxiety and depression where it really hasn't been helped by antidepressants. These are all signs and symptoms that potentially folate levels are low. And the hardest thing is actually to pick which one you should start with. So I've come up with some general guidelines. They're by no means definitive, but here are some of the things that I would consider. So if you have a family history of estrogen dominant conditions like endometriosis, fibrocystic breasts, fibrocystic ovaries, then I would be cautious with methyls. It doesn't mean don't use them, but it gives an indication that you may have a COMT++ polymorphism. And it's the COMT++ polymorphism people that tend to have the biggest issue with methyls, not because they shouldn't be taking them, because they don't utilize them particularly well. So we have to look at measures in which we help utilization. And This is, a lot of people refer to this as over-methylation. I don't call it over-methylation, I call it underutilization. So we've got to be careful with these people, because if you push too many methyls, they're often the people that will get the side effects. Now, next week, we're going to be talking about side effects and what we've got to look out for. So make sure you tap into that session. All these resources are going to go onto our website under the resources section, so you can go into mthfrsupport.com.au, have a look under resources, and you'll have all these videos and all the PDFs at your fingertips. So the other thing is, if you have the MTHFS plus, then I actually think 5-methyl is a better option to start with. If you reacted to typical B vitamins in the past, so if you've taken a multivitamin or a multi-B and you really don't feel particularly well with it and you feel nauseous, that to me is a really good indication there is something wrong with your folate pathway. And I think a lot of our patients just feel so much better alone by just taking out folic acid. If that's the case, then I do think methylfolate is probably the better option to start with. If you've suffered from anxiety and depression and typical antidepressants have not worked for you in the past, then I definitely think methylfolate is a good option. So what do we actually do? And I think it's really important at this point to advise you that it is best that you work with a qualified practitioner and don't just go off and do this willy-nilly yourself. Now, I realize that a lot of you don't have access to practitioners, and if you do embark on this yourself, then please make sure that you read our next week's signs and symptoms of methylfolate issues before you start, and always make sure you've got niacin on hand, which is your antidote, and we're going to talk about that next week. So if you are going to introduce methylfolate on your own, the way that you should do it is this. Number one, always make sure that you've got your cofactors in place first. So our starter B is a really good place to start. Secondly, pick your B12, because if you remember from our session last week, if you don't have B12 in place, then you will not use your methyls, and that's often when people get a block. Step 3, if you have got gut dysfunction, or you've got major liver dysfunction, or you've got low glutathione, sulfur issues, detoxification issues, you have to fix those first, because if you stimulate the upstream metabolites, you are going to be in a world of hurt, because you are just putting extra pressure on these pathways that don't work. So think of it like this. If you are sitting in a stream neck deep in water, and I let out the floodgates upstream of a bucket of water coming down, you're going to drown. And that's what I liken this to. So you've got to make sure that you're not sitting neck deep, that you're actually ankle deep, and you can cope with the detoxification capacity starting. So for example, a lot of people have very high heavy metals. They might have mercury, aluminium, or lead. So when you give folate, methylfolate particularly, you're going to be stimulating detoxification processes. But if your detoxification capacity is not good enough, you're going to feel sick, because you're releasing toxins, but your body's got no way of getting rid of them. So it's really important that these pathways are opened first. So if you want to try, once you've corrected these other things first, then the steps should be starter B and your B12 in place first for at least 2 weeks. Then you start with 100 milligrams only of methylfolate per day. And you do that for approximately a week. You take it after breakfast with your starter B, and you do that for 1 week. Now, as long as you don't have any negative side effects, and you'll see those next week, so make sure you look at that list. And it's things like, the most important things we want to look out for are an increase in anxiety and a decrease in mood. If they happen at all, you need to stop, take your niacin, and then go back to a lesser dose. If it happens again, you need to stop and not take any more methyl, and work out why you had that reaction. So perhaps it is a gut issue, or perhaps it is a liver issue. So you take the 100 milligrams every day for a week. If you're okay with that, you increase it to 200 milligrams the following week. If you're okay with that, you increase it to 300 and then to 400 the following week. So you're taking 400 micrograms. And some of you with particularly homozygous MTHFR mutations may need to go a lot higher, but that's when you can take a product like, say, your Total B, which has got all the methyls in it, including 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate at 400. And you may want to just sit with that for a while to see how you go. So I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of discussion on the Facebook page today. So I really look forward to seeing it, and post your questions there so we can tackle those. And I look forward to seeing you next week to talk about the side effects and the complications with methylfolate for a lot of people. So I look forward to seeing you then, and hope you can join us today. Thanks a lot. Bye.